Hello and welcome to UPSC Preparation Simplified, an initiative by Rao's IS Study Circle where we try to solve the problems that you aspirants might be facing while preparing for the UPSC examination. Today, the guest is Mr. Anubhav Sharma. He is a teacher of Polity Governance. He is also an optional teacher of Public Administration at Rao's IS. And today we are going to talk about a very important topic, and that topic deals with the cooling off period that is required for the IAS people who actually retire from the services. So sir, welcome on board.
My pleasure, sir.
So this topic actually has gained a lot of prominence in the recent past, and we have seen that many former civil servants have got benefited out of this, especially Mr. S. Jaishankar, who is currently serving the foreign ministry in a very right fashion. So sir, what is this cooling off period? Can you just explain something?
Sir, in this context, to put it very simply, cooling off period would mean that there is a minimum time that one will need to let pass after retiring from the services, and after that period only you can take up any other job, that is private job or some other job. Right now the condition is that there should be 1 year that should pass after you're retiring from the service before you take up a job in private field. Important point to keep in mind is there are certain jobs which are exempted from this period. That is, for example, if someone, an IAS officer who's retired from services, want to join public sector units or any other public sector sort of branches, the cooling off period is not mandatory. Apart from it, this is a common question and a lot of times students are getting confused. Even with respect to joining political parties after retirement, you do not have to serve cooling off period. Apart from it, one very important thing to keep in mind, this 1 year mandatory cooling off period can also be waived off if government has permitted that particular IAS officer or for that matter public servant from sort of serving this cooling off period in order to join any service.
One of the examples that we can actually always quote is of S. Jaishankar when he actually asked the Prime Minister to waive off his cooling off period and he could join Tata board.
Precisely.
Now, sir, when we say cooling off is required, so why cooling off is required? Why government has made this kind of a provision?
So the thing is that when we talk about public services, they cannot be taken at par with public, that is private jobs. The reason is very simple. When you become an IAS officer, when you become an IPS officer, you essentially get to a position where you are making some very important decisions. These decisions are decisions which are important from standpoint of people, that is of public importance. You are made custodian of public resources. Many of the decisions that you're going to take, many of the advice that is what you're going to give will be the basis on how exactly government is going to approach any issue, and that goes across ministries, across decisions that government is taking. In this regard, the idea is that all activities of a public servant must be beyond doubt. There should not be an iota of doubt on the conduct of public servant, and there should not be any suspicion whether the decision was influenced by any factor apart from public good and rationality. In this regard, it becomes very necessary that whenever a public servant is retiring from services, there should be some cooling off period. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, but the point is there should be some cooling off period so that a person, whenever he gets absorbed by private sector, his actions will not be looked upon as some of the things that he might have done in the last few years of his service. In this regard, another very important point to keep in mind is that when we talk about public servants, during the last leg of their service, they essentially get to very high ranks. And at that position, their capacity to influence government decision also becomes very high. As such, it furthermore becomes important that after retiring, they serve a minimum cooling off period so that whenever they get absorbed by any private sector, they essentially, that is their probity or their integrity is beyond question.
Now, here actually two questions come to my mind. The first important question is the right to work. Now, when we talk about the Constitution of India, it promises us right to work. So if the person is retired from the government services and if he wants to work in private sector, what is the harm in it?
So the thing is, I think one thing that we must always understand, and that is something which should be there for all the aspirants also, that when we join public services, when we talk about IAS service, IAS, IPS, IRS, we essentially are talking about a service where you're going to work for the people and the opportunity that it provides you. There is no other job which gives them that opportunity. And that is why when we do an analysis of the people who are actually serving in this esteemed services, they are among the best of the best. In this regard, it becomes very necessary that whenever you give this this commitment to join this service. It's not for the money, it's not for the prestige, it is about this opportunity. A very important component of coming good on this opportunity is for you to be prepared for sacrifice. Apart from the other sacrifices with respect to how exactly they can conduct themselves in media, how exactly they can conduct themselves, that is in public space, this is again one very reasonable expectation from the part of public servants, that because you upheld these positions, very important positions, you should be prepared for the sacrifice of serving this cooling off period, which in my opinion is very reasonable, sir.
Now, one more thing that actually bothers me is that government has recently promoted a lot of lateral entry.
True.
And whenever you're talking to lateral entry, it means we're inviting the people from the private sector to perform their duties in the public sector domain as well. So when we can invite people from the private sector to work in the public domain, what is the harm in allowing people retiring from public services to go in private segment?
So it's a very good doubt. In fact, this is a doubt which a lot of aspirants are also having. So when we talk about lateral entry, basically what we are talking about is that we need some of the experts from private field into very specific government assignments, very specific government roles, and there will be a period for which they are going to serve in that capacity. But it cannot be weighed in the same manner. And when we talk about public servants, that is full-time IAS officers leaving service and then joining private sector, for the reason that when we talk about IAS, IPS, they have served for a considerable period of time, and they have understood several aspects of government functioning, several ways in which government takes their decision, several aspects of how exactly decision making is being done, and this information becomes very important for public importance. So for us to compare the two, I don't believe it to be a very fair or very right. The whole concept, the whole idea and the rationale behind it is absolutely different. So in my opinion, whenever a public servant is leaving public services after retirement, there should be a mandatory cool-off period, and it should not be confused with lateral entry.
So the first thing that I can understand is that whenever we are inviting people from the private sector, it is for a shorter stint or duration, for a specified task, and apart from that, we are also focusing on certain set of skills as well. That is, which is not available right now. That is why we are doing it. So that's actually is the reasonable base on which we are inviting them. Now, when we talk about these public servants performing these public roles as well, we also need to pay attention to the participation in political parties. So we have seen that many civil servants, after retiring or even after resigning, they start some political parties or they become part of the political parties as well. So is there any cooling off period required in that space as well?
So with respect to political parties, there is as of now no cooling off period which is mandatory, but certainly this has been a concern and it has been expressed by several experts across the field that there should be a mandatory cooling off period in joining political parties as well. The reason is very simple, as I just explained, that the last few years of a public servant is that phase where he essentially has maximum influence in the decision making of the government.
Of course.
In that respect, there can always be this suspicion, there can always be this question that might be asked that just because this particular public servant has joined this particular party, what if this public servant during his service, that is last leg of his service, was favoring this political party, and now this political party is avoiding this public servant after retirement. As such, again, the question of conflict of interest, question of probity of the office are again rising here, and it becomes necessary that we are addressing this issue. In this respect, another point to keep in mind is that one of the concerns as to should we be allowing cooling off period, shouldn't we be allowing cooling off period has been, will it be violative of Article 14 of the civil servants? Because certainly even civil servants are Indian citizens. Article 14, equality before law and equal protection of law applies to them. One of the concerns that government has expressed is with respect to that civil servants will not form a reasonable classification for them to have this affirmative action of them being treated as a different class. And that I know might sound a bit technical, but this is the basis on which we can put restrictions, or for that matter, we can give some special privileges to one class of citizens. One of the concerns of the government is, are public servants who are retiring from public services, that is your IAS, IPS, are they qualifying that separate class of citizens on which this condition of not joining political parties is applicable or not? So that is a matter which I guess for judiciary eventually to decide on, but this is one of the concerns which is there, sir.
Now, one thing we have seen is that there is a cooling off period required, especially for civil servants per se. but there are exemptions allowed as well. So even if we go into any kind of policy making, if exemptions are allowed, will it be treating everyone equally?
So again, it's a gray area where we essentially will need to relook at it, because the questions are around this, that on one hand we are talking about probity, we are talking about protecting the integrity of these services, and that is why we have a cooling off provision. But then we are also allowing this exemption where the government of the day can actually exempt you to not serve this period and go and join any private sector. This is indeed a concern. This is indeed a matter which needs to be relooked into. Another point to keep in mind here is, sir, with respect to even the benefits which the family members of an IAS officer or an IPS officer can get. In this regard, what happens is the fact that the conditions that a public servant will need to come good at, does probity of the office demand it should extend even to his family members? It's a very tough question to answer, probably not the right place for us to be discussing it. But again, this is something that we need to relook at, because these are concerns, these are case studies which now, government is facing on daily basis. And I think it is necessary, this is high time now, that we are able to bring a bit more clarity and uniformity across these conditions.
Actually, the basic idea is to maintain neutrality of the services.
Sir. Exactly, sir.
And neutrality and anonymity is the core value that we actually practice as well in our civil services as well. Now, moving forward, if we are into this kind of situation where there is so much of discussion and debate going on, there must be some kind of suggestion as well, how we can actually improve the situation.
True, sir. Sir, I think first and foremost what government should be doing is to institute a committee which can relook into it, which can look into what all jobs should be allowed, what all jobs should not be allowed. There should be a lot more uniformity across services, across jobs. With respect to political party in particular, I am of the opinion, and I can actually say for a lot of experts also say the same, that for political parties there should be a cooling off period for public servant before joining any political party, and this cooling off period should be substantial. It should in fact be more than joining a private party. Apart from it, even with respect to when we talk about joining public sector, the question is still there that it might just be the fact that government is appointing you for a post-retirement job. In this regard also, I think it's very necessary that we are bringing some regulations, we essentially are bringing some uniformity across it. One of the things which I think no one is going to doubt is the matter for which this can be exempted must be something which pertains to national interest in a very substantial manner.
Exactly.
It might just be that the services of a public servant even after retirement might be required for certain specific issues that are very important for core national issues, national interest. Yes, only on those matters we should be allowing this exemption, but apart from it, as far as possible, what we need to do is to have a good solid cooling off period regulations, and it must be uniform. So this is what I believe must be done.
I think that basically sums up the entire discussion as well, because we need to maintain neutrality, we need to maintain anonymity. At the same time, there should be least number of exceptions for everyone who is trying to serve this country.
Precisely, sir.
So thank you, sir. Thank you for your time and patience, of course. And thank you for discussing this topic with us, because this is a very important topic and we expect a question on this particular topic, especially in polity governance and also in public administration, because it is also a part of that. And we have seen a similar kind of a question in the field of ethics as well. So I think this particular understanding will give students enough clarity about how to handle it. Thank you, sir. So this was Mr. Anubhav Sharma, sir, who has actually shared his knowledge and expertise in this particular topic. This topic is very important from the perspective of polity and governance and also from the perspective of ethics. Now, all those people who are following public administration as a subject, they will also be getting benefit from this. I hope that this has clarified a lot of your doubts, and we believe that such kind of content will actually help you in the examination as well. For more such content, please stay tuned to Rouse IAS, and thank you for watching this.